The night was cold, the sky clouded over, and Privet Drive lay silent under the dim glow of street lamps. Albus Dumbledore stood at the edge of the street, his blue eyes scanning the darkness as he waited. Soon enough, a tabby cat slinked out of the shadows, transforming into Professor McGonagall. The two exchanged solemn words, their conversation filled with grief over the Potter's tragic fate. Then, with a soft pop, Hagrid appeared on a flying motorbike, cradling a bundle in his arms. But there was not just one bundle, there were two. As McGonagall gasped and Dumbledore's brows furrowed, Hagrid carefully unwrapped the blankets, revealing a tiny girl curled beside her brother. She was no more than a year old, her soft wisps of black hair mirroring Harry's. Though her face was rounder, her cheeks fuller. Though fast asleep, she gripped Harry's tiny fingers as if she knew she had lost everything except him. Dumbledore's expression darkened with contemplation. "Lily and James' daughter. I had hoped she would be safe elsewhere, but fate has decided otherwise." McGonagall looked between the two children. "Are we truly leaving them here, Albus? Both of them?" Dumbledore sighed. "It is for their protection. Together, they will share the same blood magic that will keep them safe. Separating them would be unwise." And so, two children were left on the doorstep of number 4, Privet Drive, the only home they had left in the world. 10 years passed, and Privet Drive remained the same, though for Harry and his little sister, Iris Potter, life had been far from easy. Iris was small for her age, her thin frame a testament to the years of being overlooked and underfed by the Dursleys. She was bright, however, perhaps too bright for her own good. While Harry had learned to endure the Dursleys' cruelty in silence, Iris had a sharper tongue, a quicker wit, and a tendency to challenge their authority when she could. It often earned her extra punishments, but she never regretted it. "Why do you always have to argue, Iris?" Harry whispered one evening as they lay in the cupboard under the stairs. "Because someone has to," she murmured. "Someone has to remind them that we're still here." Harry sighed, but deep down, he admired her for it. If he had been alone in this house, he wasn't sure he would have lasted. Iris made things more bearable. She gave him something to protect. Then came the day that changed everything, the day the letters arrived. At first, it was just one letter addressed to Mr. H. Potter and Miss I. Potter, the cupboard under the stairs. Harry had barely touched it before Uncle Vernon snatched it away. More letters followed, then dozens, then hundreds, flooding into the house through every possible opening. Vernon panicked, dragging them off to a remote shack on an island. That was where they met Hagrid. The half-giant burst through the door at midnight, his great shaggy beard framing a warm yet fierce expression. "Harry, and you too, Iris. Blimey, look at ye, both of ye, all grown up." "Who are you?" Iris asked warily, stepping in front of Harry instinctively. Hagrid grinned. "Name's Hagrid, keeper of keys and grounds at Hogwarts. And I'm here to tell ye, you're both wizards." There was a stunned silence. A what?" Harry stammered. "A wizard, o' course, and so's your sister. Both of ye, famous you are." Iris narrowed her eyes. "Famous?" Hagrid's face fell slightly. "Ah, right, ye don't know. Harry, Iris, your parents didn't just die in a car crash like the Muggles told ye. They were murdered by the darkest wizard of all time, Voldemort." Harry and Iris exchanged a look. For years they had accepted the Dursleys' version of events, but this felt like the missing piece of a puzzle they hadn't even known existed. "He tried to kill ye both," Hagrid continued, voice heavy with emotion. "But he couldn't. He lost all his power when he failed. That's why you're famous, the boy who lived and the girl who survived." Iris swallowed hard. Her head was spinning. Harry looked just as shaken. "You mean," Harry said slowly, "there's a whole world of magic out there?" "Aye," Hagrid nodded, "and you two belong in it." For the first time in their lives, hope sparked in their hearts. The train to Hogwarts was unlike anything Iris had ever seen before. The gleaming scarlet engine, the bustling crowd of students, the sheer excitement in the air, it all felt surreal. She clutched Harry's hand tightly as they stepped onto platform 9 Thors, her heart pounding. "Can you believe this is real?" Harry whispered, eyes wide with wonder. Iris shook her head, grinning. Nope, but I'm not complaining. They hauled their trunks aboard and quickly found an empty compartment. Not long after, a boy with bright red hair and a smattering of freckles poked his head in. Mind if I sit here? Everywhere else is full, he asked. Go ahead, Harry said. The boy plopped down, stuffing a sandwich in his mouth. I'm Ron, by the way. Ron Weasley. I'm Harry, Harry said, and then nudged Iris. Iris Potter, she said with a small wave. Ron choked on his sandwich. Potter? As in Harry Potter? His eyes darted between the two of them. Blimey, I didn't know you had a sister. Iris shrugged. Most people don't, apparently. That's mental, Ron said, still staring. You both, you know? He pointed hesitantly to his forehead. Harry nodded, pulling back his fringe to reveal the famous lightning-shaped scar. Iris did the same, exposing a thinner, more delicate scar tracing along her temple. Ron whistled. Wicked. Just then the door slid open again and a bushy-haired girl peered in. Have any of you seen a toad? A boy named Neville lost his. No toads here, Iris replied. The girl stepped in anyway, crossing her arms. You're Harry Potter? Her eyes flickered to Iris. And you're his sister? That's what they tell me, Iris said dryly. I'm Hermione Granger, she said, then quickly added, you should both put on your robes, we'll be arriving soon. And just like that, the four of them, Harry, Iris, Ron, and Hermione, became part of something bigger than they had ever imagined. The Sorting Hat was intimidating. As Iris sat on the stool, the old tattered hat slipped over her head and murmured in her ear. Ah, another Potter. Curious, very curious. Brave, yes, but your mind is sharp, sharp as a Ravenclaw's. And something else, something hidden, a fire in you, a hunger to prove yourself. Iris's hands clenched into fists. Put me where I belong, she thought. The hat chuckled. Oh, you are bold, aren't you? Very well, Gryffindor. The table erupted in cheers as she hopped down and joined Harry, who was already grinning at her from the Gryffindor table. Ron soon followed, and even Hermione ended up with them. Their Hogwarts adventure had truly begun. The Great Hall was unlike anything Iris had ever seen. Candles floated above them, twinkling like stars, and the enchanted ceiling mirrored the night sky. Plates and goblets gleamed in the candlelight as mountains of food appeared before them. Iris stared in awe, her hunger momentarily forgotten as she took it all in. Brilliant, isn't it? Ron said, already stuffing his face with roast chicken. It's unbelievable, Iris murmured, reaching for a piece of bread. Harry was just as amazed, though he kept sneaking glances toward the teacher's table. Iris followed his gaze and immediately spotted him, the man with the hooked nose and greasy black hair, staring at Harry with something between hatred and deep curiosity. Who's that? Iris whispered. Professor Snape, Ron muttered. Potions. Nasty bloke from what my brothers say. Harry shivered. He looks like he wants to set me on fire. Us, Iris corrected. He's glaring at me too. Maybe he's got something against Potters, Ron suggested with a shrug. Before Iris could reply, an odd, twitchy-looking man with a turban sneezed, making Snape break his intense stare. Wonder what his problem is, Iris murmured, still watching Snape carefully. The next morning, classes began, and Iris quickly realized that Hogwarts was nothing like the dull, lifeless lessons at their old school. Transfiguration with Professor McGonagall was challenging but fascinating, and Charms was already proving to be a favorite, thanks to the tiny, excitable Professor Flitwick. However, it was potions that truly put them to the test. Snape swept into the dungeons like a living shadow, his robes billowing behind him. He didn't bother with introductions. Instead, he began with a roll call, pausing dramatically when he reached Harry's name. Ah, yes, Snape drawled, his black eyes narrowing. Our new celebrities. Iris bristled at his tone but kept quiet. You are here to learn the subtle science and exact art of potion making, Snape continued in a silky voice. I don't expect many of you to truly appreciate the beauty of a simmering cauldron, the delicate power of liquids that creep through human veins, but for those select few who possess the talent, I can teach you how to bottle fame, brew glory, and even put a stopper in death. Iris found herself leaning forward, intrigued despite her annoyance at his attitude. Potter, Snape suddenly snapped. What would I get if I added powdered root of asphodel to an infusion of wormwood? Harry blinked. I don't know, sir. Snape sneered. Clearly, fame isn't everything. His gaze flickered to Iris. And you, Miss Potter? Do you know? Iris took a deep breath. It makes the draught of living death, sir. Snape's expression didn't change, but there was a flicker of something. Annoyance? Surprise? At least one Potter has been paying attention, he murmured. Let's see if you can keep up, Miss Potter. I won't tolerate arrogance in my classroom. Iris swallowed back a retort. It was clear that Snape had already decided to dislike them, but she wasn't about to let him get under her skin. Harry nudged her under the table. How did you know that? I read our textbook before term started, she whispered. Ron groaned. Great, another Hermione. Iris smirked. You'll thank me when we don't fail this class. But despite her quick answer, one thing was clear. Snape was watching both her and Harry very closely, and something told Iris that he wouldn't be making things easy for them. Iris had always been a quick learner, but nothing could have prepared her for the sheer chaos of Hogwarts. Between trying to keep up with classes, avoiding Peeves' pranks, and dealing with Ron's ongoing complaints about homework, she barely had a moment to breathe. But there was one thing that stood out above everything else: Quidditch. Seeker? Me? Harry gaped at Wood, the Gryffindor Quidditch captain, after being caught flying during their first broomstick lesson. Iris stood beside him, equally stunned. That was the best bit of flying I've ever seen from a first year, Wood said excitedly. McGonagall thinks you could be the youngest Seeker in a century. Harry still looked doubtful. Iris, on the other hand, grinned. If he's playing, I want to learn too. Wood laughed. We'll see about that, but for now, I think we've found Gryffindor's secret weapon. And just like that, Harry was on the team. Iris was thrilled for him, but also slightly envious. She loved flying just as much as Harry did, and she couldn't wait for her chance to prove herself. A week later, things took a strange turn. It all started when the trio, Harry, Iris, and Ron, decided to help Hermione look for a missing library book. That was when they stumbled upon something far more interesting. Third floor corridor is off limits, yeah? Ron whispered as they crept along the deserted hallway. So why are we here again? Because Hermione thinks she saw something suspicious, Iris muttered, and when she thinks something's suspicious, she doesn't let it go. I can hear you, you know, Hermione hissed. They rounded a corner and stopped short. A massive wooden door stood before them, slightly ajar. Harry hesitated. Maybe we shouldn't, but Iris was already pushing it open. The moment they stepped inside, a low growl rumbled through the air. Their eyes widened as they took in the sight before them. A massive, three-headed dog stood on the other side of the room, drool dripping from its snarling mouths. Run, Hermione shrieked. They didn't need to be told twice. Slamming the door behind them, they sprinted down the corridor, hearts pounding. What was that? Ron gasped when they finally stopped. A Cerberus. Iris breathed, her mind racing. But why is there a giant three-headed dog inside the school? Harry frowned. And what was it standing on? Hermione was still catching her breath. It was standing on a trapdoor, she said finally. It's guarding something. Iris exchanged a look with Harry. This was bigger than they had expected. And something told them that Hogwarts was hiding far more secrets than just magic and Quidditch. The discovery of the three-headed dog haunted Iris's thoughts for days. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw its massive paws covering the trapdoor, its three sets of yellow eyes glinting in the dim light. What could it possibly be guarding? And why was it hidden in a school full of children? It has to be important, she muttered to Harry as they sat in the common room, pretending to do their homework. Harry nodded. Hagrid might know something. He's the one who brought us to Hogwarts. Maybe he's seen it before. Ron looked up from his half-finished essay. You lot want to ask Hagrid about a massive three-headed dog? Why not? Iris said. He's the gamekeeper. If anyone knows about giant creatures lurking in the castle, it's him, Ron groaned. Fine, but if we get eaten, I'm blaming you. The next afternoon, they made their way down to Hagrid's hut, which sat on the edge of the Forbidden Forest. Smoke curled lazily from the chimney, and Fang, Hagrid's massive boarhound, barked loudly as they knocked on the door. "Come in." Hagrid's deep voice boomed. They stepped inside, immediately greeted by the warm scent of tea and freshly baked rock cakes. Hagrid beamed at them. "What brings ye here?" Harry hesitated. "We, may have seen something on the third floor." Hagrid's smile faltered. "Did ye now?" Iris leaned forward. A big three-headed dog standing on a trapdoor. Hagrid nearly choked on his tea. "Ye weren't supposed to see that," he spluttered. "So you do know about it," Ron said triumphantly. "Of course I do," Hagrid grumbled. "But that's none of your business. That's Dumbledore's business, that is." Harry and Iris exchanged a glance. "Whatever it's guarding," Iris said carefully, "it has to be something really valuable, doesn't it?" Hagrid sighed, rubbing his forehead. "Listen, I shouldn't be telling ye this, but it's between Dumbledore and Nicholas Flamel." "Nicholas who?" Harry asked. Hagrid clamped his mouth shut. "I've said too much. Now, off with ye before I get myself in trouble." As they walked back to the castle, Iris's mind was racing. "Nicholas Flamel," she muttered. "Who is he?" "Only one way to find out," Harry said. "We need to check the library." And just like that, they had their next mission. The name Nicholas Flamel echoed in Iris's mind as she followed Harry and Ron back to the Gryffindor common room. Whoever he was, he had to be important. Important enough for Dumbledore to keep something of his hidden under a massive, three-headed dog. "We need to find out who Flamel is," she whispered as they climbed through the portrait hole. "How though?" Ron asked. "The library's massive. We can't just start looking through every book." Harry frowned. "Maybe Hermione?" "Maybe what?" They turned to see Hermione standing by the fireplace, arms crossed. Iris grinned. "Good timing. We need your help." It didn't take much convincing for Hermione to agree. The moment they mentioned Nicholas Flamel, her eyes sparkled with interest. "Why didn't you just say so earlier?" she huffed. "I've read about him before. I just have to remember where." The next day at breakfast, Hermione arrived with a determined expression. "I know where we can find him." "That was fast," Ron muttered. "Of course it was. It's in the restricted section of the library." Iris groaned. "Of course it is." That meant they needed permission from a teacher, which they weren't likely to get. "Unless we borrow a way in," Harry suggested. Ron raised an eyebrow. "You mean sneak in?" "You make it sound like a bad idea," Iris said with a smirk. Ron sighed. "It is a bad idea. But fine." That night, under the cover of darkness, they crept toward the library. Harry held the invisibility cloak tightly around them, making sure all four of them were hidden. "This is brilliant," Iris whispered as they slipped past a snoozing Filch. The library was eerily silent, the moonlight casting long shadows over the towering bookshelves. The restricted section was at the very back, its books chained to the shelves. Harry reached for one, but the moment his fingers brushed the cover, a piercing scream echoed through the library. They froze. "Run," Hermione hissed. They dashed out just as Filch's footsteps thundered closer. Heart pounding, Iris followed Harry through the corridors until they finally collapsed behind a statue, gasping for breath. "That was too close?" Ron wheezed. "Did you even get anything?" Iris asked, rubbing her sore knees. Harry shook his head. "No, but we need to try again. Nicholas Flamel is the key to whatever is hidden under that trapdoor, and I'm not giving up until we find out what." The failed library mission left them frustrated, but it didn't stop them. The mystery of Nicholas Flamel gnawed at Iris's mind like an unsolved puzzle. She hated not knowing things, especially when they were this important. They needed another way to find out who Flamel was, and as it turned out, luck was on their side. "Honestly," Hermione said the next morning at breakfast, flipping through a history of magic, "I can't believe none of you remembered this sooner." "Remembered what?" Harry asked, shoving a piece of toast into his mouth. Hermione turned the book around, tapping her finger on a passage. "Nicholas Flamel is the only known maker of the Philosopher's Stone." Iris leaned in. "The Philosopher's Stone?" Ron frowned. "Wait, what's that?" "It's an object that can turn metal into pure gold and produce the elixir of life," Hermione explained. "It makes the drinker immortal." Harry and Iris exchanged a glance. Immortality. That explained why something so powerful was being hidden at Hogwarts. And you're saying Flamel made one? Iris asked. Hermione nodded. Not just made one. The one. The only one in existence. The weight of the discovery settled over them. This wasn't just some ordinary secret. This was something people would kill for. And suddenly, everything made sense. The dog, Harry whispered. It's guarding the stone. Which means someone might be trying to steal it, Iris added. Ron groaned. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. And we're right in the middle of it, aren't we? Looks like it, Harry said grimly. They didn't have much time to think about it, though, because their next challenge came in the form of Gryffindor's first Quidditch match. The entire school buzzed with excitement as the day of the game arrived. Iris had never seen anything like it. Banners waved from the stands, enchanted by students to flash between Gryffindor red and gold. You ready? She asked Harry as they stood outside the changing rooms. Harry took a deep breath, gripping his broom tightly. As ready as I'll ever be, she gave him a small grin. Then go out there and win. And he did. Or at least, he would have, if it weren't for the fact that someone tried to kill him. One moment, Harry was soaring through the air. The next, his broom was jerking violently under him, as if something invisible was trying to shake him off. Iris stood frozen in the stands, gripping the railing. Something's wrong, she whispered. Ron and Hermione saw it too. And when Hermione followed Harry's out-of-control broom to its source, she gasped. Snape, she breathed. Iris followed her gaze. Snape stood at the edge of the stands, lips moving in silent incantations. He's cursing the broom. Without thinking, they sprang into action. Hermione bolted toward Snape, pushing her way through the crowd. A moment later, she reached him and set his cloak on fire. Snape yelped and stumbled, breaking eye contact. And just like that, Harry's broom stopped shaking. A second later, he plummeted downward, catching something in his hand before he hit the ground. The stadium exploded into cheers. Harry had caught the snitch. Iris let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. That was way too close. But as she looked back at Snape, who was angrily patting out the last of the flames, she had a feeling this was far from over. Even though Gryffindor won the match, the victory felt hollow. Harry had nearly died, and the fact that Snape had been the one cursing his broom sent a chill down Iris's spine. They needed answers. That night, back in the common room, Harry tossed the snitch between his fingers, deep in thought. Hermione sat beside him, looking troubled. Snape was trying to knock you off your broom, she said. That proves he's after the philosopher's stone. Ron groaned. Why does it always have to be Snape? Because he's suspicious, that's why. Iris muttered. What if he's trying to steal the stone for you-know-who? That thought made the room go silent. Harry clenched his jaw. We need to talk to Hagrid again. He has to know more than he's letting on. The next day, they trudged through the crisp November air toward Hagrid's hut. The half-giant was outside, tending to a few of his pumpkins, when he saw them approach. Ah, back again, are ye? He said, dusting off his hands. What's this about? Harry got straight to the point. Hagrid, we know about the philosopher's stone. Hagrid visibly stiffened. Dunno what you're talking about, he muttered, suddenly very interested in his pumpkin. Iris crossed her arms. Hagrid, please. At that, Hagrid sighed and waved them inside. I shouldn't be telling you this, he said, pouring them all tea. But I trust Dumbledore, and if he says the stone is safe, then it's safe. But why is it even here? Ron asked. Hagrid stirred his tea absent-mindedly. Dumbledore's protecting it, that's why. He's got enchantments on it. More than just Fluffy, mind ya. Fluffy. The three-headed dog. What other enchantments? Hermione asked eagerly. Can't tell you that, Hagrid said firmly. But I can tell ye one thing. Nobody can get past all them protections. No chance. That should have been reassuring, but it wasn't. Who besides Dumbledore would be powerful enough to break through? Iris asked. Hagrid hesitated. Dunno, he admitted. But whoever it is, they're wasting their time. The stone's safe. They didn't believe that. As they left Hagrid's hut, Iris turned to Harry. If someone's really after the stone, they're not going to give up. We need to figure out what other protections are in place. Harry nodded. And more importantly, we need to figure out who's after it, before it's too late. The more they thought about it, the more uneasy they became. Hagrid was confident the stone was safe, but whoever was after it clearly wasn't giving up. And if it really was Snape, they needed to figure out how much he knew. The problem was that they still didn't know what kind of enchantments were protecting the stone. If they wanted to stay one step ahead, they needed to find out. The opportunity came sooner than expected. One evening, Hermione was flipping through a book when she suddenly gasped. I knew I'd read about this before. Ron looked up from his half-finished essay. Read about what? The enchantments. Some of them, at least. I think each Hogwarts professor put one in place. She flipped through the pages. Flitwick is a charms master, so he probably used some kind of spell barrier. Sprout, she must have used dangerous plants. Iris perked up. Like Devil's Snare? Exactly. Hermione nodded. McGonagall's brilliant at transfiguration, so she could have transfigured an obstacle into something nearly impossible to get past. Harry frowned. And Snape? Hermione hesitated. Probably something to do with potions. Maybe a riddle with poisons and antidotes. Ron groaned. Great, so basically a whole maze of really dangerous magic. But that means Snape doesn't need to steal the stone, Iris pointed out. He already has access to one of the enchantments. If he figures out how to break the others... Harry's jaw clenched. Then nothing will stop him. They had to act fast. The next clue came from Hagrid, completely by accident. They visited him again, trying to poke for more information, but this time something distracted them. A large black egg sat on his table. Hagrid grinned when he saw them staring. A dragon egg, he said proudly. Won it in a card game. Iris's eyes widened. Hagrid, that's illegal. Nonsense, Hagrid huffed. I always wanted a dragon. Their panic only increased when, later that night, the egg hatched. A tiny, scaly creature with leathery wings and sharp little teeth wriggled out, sneezing sparks. A Norwegian ridgeback, Hagrid said proudly. I'm calling him Norbert. As fascinating as the baby dragon was, it was also an enormous problem. The thing wouldn't stay tiny forever, and if someone found out Hagrid had an illegal dragon, he'd be in serious trouble. We have to get rid of it, Hermione said urgently. Send it away before it burns the hut down. Hagrid looked heartbroken, but in the end, he agreed. Charlie Weasley, Ron's older brother, worked with dragons in Romania. If they could get Norbert to him, everything would be fine. That plan, however, led to an even bigger disaster. Because while sneaking Norbert up to the astronomy tower for Charlie's friends to take him, they got caught. By Filch. And suddenly, worrying about the philosopher's stone took a back seat, because now they had to survive detention. Detention at Hogwarts was never pleasant, but for Harry, Iris, Hermione, and Ron, it turned out to be far worse than they expected. Instead of writing lines or cleaning cauldrons, Filch led them to Hagrid, who stood waiting at the edge of the Forbidden Forest. Iris frowned. The forest? You mean our detention is out here? Hagrid nodded. Got somewhat dangerous wandering about. We need to find out what it is. Ron paled. Something dangerous? Could be a wounded unicorn. Hagrid explained. Somewhat's been killing 'em. Terrible thing. Iris shivered. The thought of something out there hunting unicorns made her uneasy, and now they had to track it down. Hagrid split them into groups. Himself with Hermione and Ron, while Harry and Iris got stuck with Draco Malfoy and Fang, Hagrid's cowardly boarhound. Draco scowled. I don't see why I have to be here, he muttered. My father will hear about this. Iris rolled her eyes. Good for him. They ventured deeper into the trees. The deeper they went, the colder the air became. Everything felt wrong. Then they saw it. A dead unicorn lay sprawled in a clearing, silver blood pooling around it. It was a haunting sight. But what truly made their skin crawl was the figure crouched over the body. A hooded figure, hunched and unnatural, was drinking the unicorn's blood. Draco let out a choked noise and bolted. Fang followed, barking wildly. Harry and Iris stood frozen, unable to look away. The figure slowly lifted its head. Though its face was obscured by the hood, they could feel its gaze. something cold and hungry, as if it were looking through them. Then it moved. It glided toward them without making a sound. Iris grabbed Harry's arm, stumbling backward, heart pounding. The air around them felt suffocating. Just as it was about to reach them, something intervened. A centaur, tall, silver-haired and fierce, galloped between them and the creature. "Begone, foul thing," he commanded. The hooded figure hissed, then vanished into the shadows. The centaur turned to Harry and Iris, his blue eyes filled with concern. "You should not be here." Iris swallowed hard. "What was that?" The centaur hesitated. "You have seen what happens to those who drink unicorn blood. It keeps one alive, but at a terrible price." His gaze shifted to Harry. "The only person who would do such a thing is one who clings to life when death should have taken them." Realization hit them like a stone. "Voldemort," Harry whispered. The centaur nodded grimly. "Yes, he is not truly alive, but he is not yet dead either." Iris felt her stomach twist. "Then that means he's after the philosopher's stone." That night, as they lay awake in their dormitory, the weight of the truth settled over them. The stone wasn't just in danger, it was the only thing keeping Voldemort from returning, and they had to stop him.